Friends, I think I am audible, no?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible.
Okay. Friends, greetings to you all on the Constitution Day. Professor Uke and Professor Nigam has already explained about the importance of both the fundamental rights and the importance of the fundamental duties. I would like to share four ideas on reflections on rights and duties. This is the most complex area both in the Western rights, theory of rights, and also Indian concept of dharma. In fact, sometimes the English language is unable to translate the meaning of the words. That's the reason kartavya denotes the best possible way of English word obligation. This is also a complex area, as I said, because the heart of the Indian Constitution is about enunciation of rights. Duties are the finer sentiments appealing to the individual persons. Duty is also seen as something which has to be done and dictated by notions of moral good. I think we need to first understand this dichotomy between rights and duties. Uh, and duties were also largely conceived as obligations of a moral or legal kind, whereas rights, they are considered as areas of freedom. But there is we can see a connection because both the rights and duties arise out of the same circumstances. I'll give an example. For instance, if a person is in a debt situation, the duty to pay correlates with the right to receive. While if you look at the origin of fundamental duties in India, while granting rights upon the citizens of India, the Constituent Assembly did not introduce the fundamental duties to the Constitution. Fundamental duties, we all know, were introduced in the 42nd Amendment in 1976 based on the report given by Swaran Singh Committee. It introduced Part 4A and Article 51A with 10 fundamental duties in the Indian Constitution. Further, 86th Amendment Act 2002 introduced and incorporated 11th fundamental duty. And the origin is also of the concept of the fundamental duty we have adopted from the former USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. It also, as the director of the Department of Justice has mentioned, it is also owes its origin to the Article 21 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which also confers the duty of individuals towards the community. I think this is the basic origin, concept, and evolution of fundamental duties. Let me next secondly, let me elaborate about fundamental duties. My colleague, Professor Uke, has mentioned about some of these, but let me reiterate some of the essential characteristic features of the fundamental duties which was introduced in the Indian Constitution. Some duties are protected by law and already being enforced through ordinary law. For example, there are laws available on offenses against the state in the Indian Penal Code 1860, which protects any activity disrupting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the state. But some duties mentioned in Article 51A appear to be legally unenforceable. Generally, in the context of COP26, climate justice debates and discussions all over in India, the dharma concept or the kartavya concept is much more clearly visible in the fundamental duties. Particularly if you look at the duties contained in clause A and B underscores constitutionalism. When we are celebrating last 7 years on this day, understanding and reiterating the importance of significance of constitution, because as a law students and law teacher, this is our everyday dharma. But when we are disseminating the people all over in India, trying to inculcate a constitutional culture, it is called as a constitutionalism that is already there in the fundamental duties class A and B, which mentions about abide by the constitution and respect its ideals and institutions. Still further, it says class B, 51 class B, which says 51A class B further mentions to cherish and follow the noble ideals which inspired our national struggle for freedom. That is where 75 years of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav we are celebrating, because it's a part. We have said this is a value. The value is salute, not only saluting the people those have contributed, but also cherish and follow the noble ideals which inspired our national struggle. Thirdly, I would look at the climate justice, the entire climate change all over India and all over the world we are debating. We are thinking about how the government should be prepared to deal with this climate change. The clause G in the fundamental duties once again highlights the citizens' duty to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, and wildlife, and also to have a compassion for living creatures. What we speak about karuna, daya, kshama, to not only to the human beings but also the animals is reflected in the 51A clause G. I will give much more again along with that. The 11th fundamental duty is more significant. I think some of my friends, those who work in the child rights area, always will say this, which is very stark reality in India. They say that if a child is not in the school, means wo kahin kaam kar raha hai, working somewhere. That is reflected after we have introduced Article 21A into the Indian Constitution. Right to education is mentioned in the fundamental duty class K. Who is a parent or a guardian to provide opportunities for education to his child, or as the case may be, the ward between age of 6 and 14 years? And also further, fundamental rights look at. Some people say the poetry you could see in the preamble of the Indian Constitution. It's right. You could look at the language, expression which is mentioned in the fundamental duty. Further fundamental duty F, which says about to value and preserve the rich heritage and composite culture of India. Such a great noble idea and value. Similarly, it also further mentions to develop the scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform. If you look at the entire access to justice, Article 39J primarily looks at how do we humanize the justice system? How do we humanize the prisons? How do we bring in more and more humanity into the integrated into the constitution? It's not just only Article 21 which speaks about right to life and personal liberty, but you look at the whole gamut of humanism, which is a part of the entire human rights theory. So that's mentioned in the class H. All these fundamental duties do not express any ideas or ideals which are capable of legal enforcement, but it appeals. These are the finer, noble sentiments to the citizens that they must do it. That's where fundamental duties, people say, are web of duties. And it is where the Indian ancient concept of dharma, which is very relevant, and it is the best way articulated in Hindi is kartavya. The concept of duty as dharma has been a central organizing force of the Indian social order for more than 2 millennia and continues to exist in new forms alongside of the rights-based society. could see the origins of this concept of duty, we can trace from classical Hindu texts of Dharma Shastra, Ardha Shastra, the notion of dharma or the duty as the right course of action is repeated throughout Bhagavad Gita. Gita's concept of duty is very different from what we find in either Western thinkers like Immanuel Kant or J.S. Mill. In the Western context of norms for human behavior, they are derived from reason and are to be met by individuals, whereas dharma in the Hindu tradition consists of rules that have been handed down over generations and are needed for social cohesion. Let me just conclude with two more ideas. I think Director of the Department of Justice mentioned about Gandhian conception of dharma. Let me take a minute to explain. The practice of dharma is most prominently visible in the Gandhian thoughts and actions. And some people argue that the idea of duty may be taken from the core of Gandhi's teaching and philosophy. Gandhi differentiated between duty and rights. He claimed that since rights cannot be taken away, thus they are not inalienable and cannot define moral and political action. However, uh, duties, however, can never be taken away from an individual. Let me conclude saying that there is a time to reconcile duty and rights based discourses. Uh, the basic human needs theory in the Western and the Indian context, which is articulated by the Indian Supreme Court, tried to reconcile between duty and rights based discourses. The present emphasis on rights tend to place duties only on the state. I think Nigam was mentioning about this and allows the state to emphasize its role in enabling exercise of freedoms rather than maintaining its population's basic needs. Whereas a duty-based system emphasizes the role of the individual to assist those who are part of one's community. The duty based system places greater respect for one's neighbor or fellow citizens. The rights system seems ideal for questions of freedom. The duty based system seems to have advantages for the provision of benefits. State could still have a primary role in enforcing and promoting both the system, both rights based system and duty based system. Most importantly, emphasis on duties can lead to more virtuous citizenry. And this in turn is required to achieve the superordinate goals like nation building, climate change, eradication of child labor, justice for all. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share some of my ideas with all of you. Thank you.